Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Off the Scribe podcast, available on all podcasting platforms. I have with me another great guest called Kelly Paardekooper. How are you, Kelly?
I'm really well, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm very excited to be speaking with you, especially after we had our little pre-interview, and now we can talk for real. Um, We're talking about your book, talking about spirituality, about science, but first, can you please introduce yourself in 50 words or less?
Oh, 50
JK.
words or less. So I am Kelly. I live in Sydney in Australia. I have a young family and I have a background as a medical professional, and I was very black and white science up until the point of starting my family and essentially having a little bit of I guess you could say a bit of a crisis of change, of being a being a mother and entering motherhood. And it propelled me into myself, into something much deeper to cope, and into that, I guess, my true self, which was my intuitive self. And from there, my world has exploded. It's been quite amazing.
Well, that's interesting. We have a lot of things to talk about your spirituality, about your transformation from being kind of a scientific minded, rational being to being not so completely rational and belief in science. Um, so can you tell me a little bit about yourself before the kind of transformation, about a little bit about what driven you, what interested you before at
Yeah.
your transformation?
Uh, I've always liked facts and figures, things that are really black and white, probably a little bit too black and white. I remember growing up, I was always told there was never any shades of grey with me. And I was probably a little bit harsh in that, a real people pleaser. But I also really wanted to help people. So that's why I went down the health route. You sort of think of a really stereotypical person who likes maths because the answers are black and white. They don't like English because it's subjective. I liked things that were really straightforward, and there was beyond reasonable doubt I was that kind of person. But then when you have a baby that comes along, they don't follow a rule book. They are not black and white. They are every shade of every color imaginable. And it kind of throws things upside down and inside out, and in a whirlpool that was crazy. So yeah, no more black and white world when that came along.
Yeah, so you kind of departed from that black and white existence that you had. Where do you think that came from, the black and white perspective or kind of worldview?
That's a really good question. I've never stopped to think where it came from because it always just was. I don't know. That's something I'd love to actually explore with past lives. You never know. There is something in there.
Okay, so
Got me thinking. Thank you.
Yeah, moving on. I'm a more kind of humanistic, or more inclined to the humanities and arts. And I never understood those kind of scientific minded people, those kinds of super geniuses. I encountered some of them, but it's a whirlwind when you encounter something like someone like that, because they are very removed from, even though they are very scientifically minded and oriented, they are very much removed from the kind of from society, shall we say. They have their own they have their own hierarchy, shall we say, of morality or ways of thinking. Did you ever find that you were a little bit different from your peers, shall we say, or from your friends?
Absolutely. Being a perfectionist was definitely pushed me up, was a bit isolating. Not everyone would understand that intense, I guess, scrutiny I'd put on myself and my level of achievement. I was really hard on myself, and not everyone was, and it maybe made me a little bit harsh and not as fun to be around as everyone else. Yeah, a little bit like if you imagine a child who was too old beyond their years, really, always trying to be
Yeah, I
grown
was
up.
like that. I was like that also. I was very snobby, shall we say. I always looked down on people who I thought were beneath me. But I tried to integrate kind of my ways of communication because I didn't have any ways to express myself. Um, and especially when you're a kind of artistic person and you have all those kinds of niche ideas and philosophies about life. Um, so did you find that your kind of scientific black and white view wasn't kind of coinciding or with your surroundings?
I managed to find a balance. I don't know if it was just a coping mechanism or a really supportive family, but certainly that creative side of me, the more imaginative, more open to other possibilities, was always suppressed. It was there, and I've now realised that it was well and truly there, but it was totally and completely suppressed because there was the goal to just get everything right.
Yeah. So did you ever have any kinds of other interests besides science? Did you find any value in art, in poetry, music, stuff that kind of, ignite the human imagination and spirit?
I certainly liked it and I enjoyed it. And I don't think that I had any kind of talent in that regard, but I didn't give myself time. It's kind of like a mini adult. There's only so much time and I've only got so much hours in the day to fill. I've got to fill it with all the other stuff that's going to help me achieve something in life. It was really quite close-minded. Not that I regret it. I'm really appreciative of the trajectory that it sent me. But at that point in time, I never gave it space. Whereas certainly as an adult, I'm a lot more appreciative. I've got two very, very creative children, creative husband, and I love seeing that in them. And I'm quite envious that it's so apparent in them at a young age. It's beautiful.
So that's great to hear. I love what you said. I love that you, even though your spirituality seems to be tainted by a good kind of black and white perspective, but which I like very much. It is a great kind of a synergy or synchronicity that is happening in your stage of life. So did you ever experience any kind of spiritual happenings before your scientific breakdown?
I desperately wanted to. And that's where I realized it was always inside me, and I suppressed it. Like I grew up watching pop culture TV like Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie and The X-Files, and to me it was that, there was TV shows and movies about this sort of stuff, so it must be something, but nothing in my world made it match, so I kept them polar opposites. And I just desperately wanted to have some kind of supernatural experience to prove it. Nothing ever happened. And then when I had my breakdown, my breakthrough, I discovered a course, and to me I went, oh, if I sign up to this course, it'll teach me how to be psychic and read tarot cards and do all this amazing stuff. And that was a real huge turning point, because you can't learn this stuff. It's not a magical trick. It's something much, much deeper, that this spirituality is where it lies. So yeah, I still haven't had any amazing mystical experiences. I've spoken to quite a few people and interviewed them, and believe it's totally, totally valid. I grew up with a family member who'd had a near-death experience. So I knew there was something there, but I just hadn't had any light bulb experience myself.
Yeah, I heard some of the accounts being written of the NDEs and near-death experiences for people who don't know. I'm also not an expert, and I don't care to be. I'm an artist and a spiritual person, but sorry, backtrack. I don't call myself an artist. I like to call myself an experimenter. But so getting back to NDEs, you know, I don't know if anyone can affirm such a theory, to say that, you know, I hovered above my bed and I saw what the thing, I saw the doctor's name tag, I saw the nurse, I don't know, doing something, watering the flowers when I was down under, no pun intended, yeah. But so when did you start? Was that kind of a NDE experience in your family the first thing that you would consider something spiritual that happened in your life, when someone told you the accounts of the afterlife or something to that effect?
I actually don't recall that being a specific moment. I grew up in a family that my mother was very open about having some gypsy-like skills, is how it was sort of portrayed. Like we had some gypsy blood somewhere. And I just used to look at her in awe and think, oh, wow, I would love to be able to do that. And never got this. You know, I wanted to be able to wake up in the middle of the night and see a figure sitting at the end of my bed, or have premonitions. I had nothing like that, but I knew my mum had something, and I was like, oh, I miss that gene. Why don't I have the gypsy gene? I've got the other side of the family's genes. So there was never a point. It was always there. It was spoken about, but it was kind of hush hush. And I guess maybe that's why I suppressed it. Partly suppressed it because it was kept hush hush, like don't tell people, they'll think we're strange. And I hadn't had any experience for myself, so I was like, well, this is maybe, you know, just park it somewhere, just keep going down the black and white world.
Yeah, there is a term in Hebrew called the kind of grandma medicines. Yeah, so I kind of, you know, I allocate anything that has to do with maybe gypsies or kind of witchcraft, I chuck it out to, you know, it's kind of a grandma medicines, you know. It's a nice way to look at the world, that you can, through alchemy or through, I don't know, summoning demons or something like this, to do your bidding and affect the natural world, or to put a hex on someone, or to, you know, to slip someone a love potion or whatever that is. So do you have any kind of, you know, superstitions, yeah, that are like that?
I used to hold on to superstitions hugely, like hugely. I played sport, and I had particular routines I would do before I played sport, and particular routines going to bed every night. And, you know, even the little things like don't step on the cracks, looking out for four-leaf clovers every time we'd walk. I had lots of little superstitions. And now coming to this place of where I am right now, I've really let go of them all, because we create the reality around us, and holding on to superstitions that something bad might happen if X, Y, and Z don't happen first. You bring that into your energy field, and we create everything around us. And Superstitions are just beliefs. There's no real substance to them. Well, certainly in my opinion.
Yeah. I also agree. I have those kinds of tics and of superstition. You have the kind of the tiles when you walk on the tiles, and you don't want to step over the lines or some insane shit like this. I'm sorry for my French, but it was appropriate, I think. Just just talking about spirituality, I want to delve deeper with you, and I want you to kind of walk me through your first kind of instance of a breakdown, shall we say, or breakthroughs. And what did it look like? When did it happen?
The huge turning point, I remember I live near the beach in Sydney, and my son must have been 9 months, 12 months old, maybe even younger, but he was just so unsettled and wouldn't stop crying. And I remember going for drives. My car had hardly any kilometers on it before I had him, and then by the time he was about 2 years old, it was an old car. I drove every day to settle him because it was the only way. But anyway, I remember sitting at a headland with him in the car, finally got into sleep, and I was just like, oh my God, this is my life. What the hell have I done? I wanted this child. I wanted a family. I was so excited. I love him, but oh my God, I don't love my life anymore. And I was just tears streaming down my face. And I just remember I hadn't been a particularly religious person, but I'd been brought up in a Christian family where there was references to God. And I remember sitting there going, oh my God, if there is a God, please help me. I can't do this anymore. And I didn't get an answer, but it was a deep knowing in myself. It was sort of like a message in the heart that just went, well, no one's going to answer you until you do it. And I had to find this strength. I was at that point going, well, I've got two choices. One choice is not even worth mentioning. It wasn't at that point, but I could understand how people get to that point of that worst case scenario. Or I just had to dig deep and find something. And it was, I really don't know how to describe it. It was really a turning point going, come on, you've got this. You are a powerful woman. You just got to get back up. And I've now come to acknowledge that my where I sit with spirituality is that God is within me. I am a part of God. God to me is universe. And it was realizing that part within myself and actually connecting to it. It took kind of like breaking down the black and white coat to really get to that truth within my heart and that inner strength and that inner power, and realizing that I am what needs to happen. So that was my turning point.
Wow, that is beautiful. That is a beautiful sentence. I am what I am supposed to be, actually. And it is very powerful. It is very powerful, and I don't want to diminish your kind of experience in any way, but to say that those kinds of beliefs were deeply rooted in the society, the culture, the kind of the ancient cultures, of course. But what was the kind of first counteract to that experience? That you tried to deny your belief, or your newfound belief, shall we say, in yourself and in the universe? Or did you just go with the flow and try to find more ways of spiritual existence?
At that point, I definitely didn't go with the flow. That phrase has probably not been used much about me up until the last couple of years. No, I forgot it. I went back into trauma, back into not coping. It's kind of like I would say I jumped straight back into the mud of dealing with a newborn. It was It was awful, but I never reached that really deep low again. And I found it was like breadcrumbs laid out by the universe to help me then along that way. It started with just a mum at daycare tapping me on the shoulder, and I'm like, who are you? She's now one of my closest friends. But through her, she led me to different teachers and different avenues. I'm trying to think what other breadcrumbs there were, but it was a definite turning point that it was like, got this, we can do this. And that coping skill that kind of tapped into was a little closer to the surface every time after. Breakdowns never got so deep after that point.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I just want to think how to tackle it, to say, so did you try to find a kind of an answer to your crisis? Where did you seek answers? Did you try to do it on your own? Did you have some counseling or guidance?
No, it was very, very much on my own, because I had this belief that having children is hard. You're going to have it hard. And I didn't believe that it was any harder for me than anyone else. So I just had to get on with it. In hindsight, perhaps my coping skills could have done with a bit of counseling, but at the same time, maybe it would have never have led me to this point. So I just toughed it out alone. We tortured my husband in the process when he went through his own transition into parenthood and dealing with a crazy wife. But yeah, we got there in the end.
Yeah. So we've mentioned your book, and I think it's a good kind of a place to start talking about it. So we have a nice jumping board to delve into our conversation, to delve into the book. This has been a short introduction just to folks listening. So let's talk about your book. I'm kind of interested. I love the title. Yeah, a spiritual human being. Yeah. Also, it kind of, I don't want to say a deity, because, well, if we have a part of God's, if we are a part of God's image, which I hate to use that kind of a terminology or that verbiage, but I will. So if we try to find the sparks of the divine in ourselves, and you were doing that with your own spiritual journey and your own finding of yourself, or refinding, or reuniting with yourself. So can you talk about the book? Why did you want to write it? What were your inspirations? What themes does it cover?
So it's called Spiritual Being Human, and it comes out on the 31st of August. It's been a book that has been in me for such a long time, and I didn't really realize what it was. But having grown up with that real duality of the black and white science and the mystical component that I kept secret and hidden and suppressed, it felt like I was a disjointed person. And perhaps if someone had written a book like this, I might not have been disjointed. The puzzle pieces would have been put together so much sooner. I call it like a playful exploration of the science of spirituality. I try to explain some of the intense science that has been studied and is out there, and make it really straightforward and simple for people to be able to pick up and go, wow, awesome. I don't need to know 20 chapters of detail. I would just like to know that, oh, wow, so someone has studied this. This is the straightforward version of why they've studied it and what their findings is. Oh, and here I can actually find it more if I need it later on. Tried to create this overall reference point for people, but then also tying it back to the really important reminder that we are more than just human beings. We are spiritual beings first and foremost, having a human experience. Our time on earth is really short in the scheme of things, and we are, like you said, sparks of the divine. We are all divine, and this human school is just temporary, just here for us to learn these soul lessons, as hard as they are sometimes.
Yeah. Let's kind of dawn on that, and to say the human school. It's a temporary human school. Okay, I can't go past that. What does it mean exactly that we are trying to learn how to become human before the clock runs out? But what are the rules? Who kind of the masterminds that game?
Is there one mastermind? That's
No, but when you say it's a school for humanity, it means that there will be a time where you'll need to know how to be human. You'll need to use those skills again, shall we say, at some point. But what happens after the clock runs out?
Yes. Well, I say human being human is a tool to learn how to get over mistakes, learn to interact with people, learn our true nature. And if we go back to, it's late at night here in Sydney, I'm thinking, but it's not coming as clearly. I'm pretty sure it is Hindu teachings that we reincarnate several times. We keep reincarnating basically until we get it right. And I'm sorry if I've got that wrong, if I've misrepresented the wrong religion.
Yeah, you break the cycle of reincarnation, and you transcend. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So every time we're here, we are here to learn some lessons, and hopefully each reincarnation we make a few less lessons, and we get a little bit closer to that point in time.
Yeah. So you prescribe to some of the tenets of Hinduism, maybe?
I am very open to it, to all religions, really. I touch on religions in my book, because when you take a step back, I'm not a theologist and I don't proclaim to be, but when you look at a lot of religions, there is an underlying theme of one messenger, and that messenger aims to propel humanity forward and bring some form of enlightenment. And it comes through all different versions and different concepts, but there tends to be an overall theme. And when you look at it, there is a distinct timeline that messenger gives the message as best it's needed to be heard for that point in time of civilization. And there are really distinct timelines when you look at it. Again, I said, I'm not a theologist, so I'm not going to proclaim to go too much deeper than that. But that was a certain trend I noticed when I sort of took that step back and looked through the lens of someone trying to see what it all means if you put all the puzzle pieces together.
Yeah, yeah. I heard some of those people, who speak about those things, and they are being they are being flogged, shall we say, on the scaffolding for for just trying to express their own opinions. And I don't defend one way or the other, the one party or the other, but I'm just saying that simply trying to construct a puzzle, to find the breadcrumbs that leads to the witch's house. It is a very kind of tasking journey, And do you find that we are not actually living our lives, shall we say, as trying to piece ourselves together, maybe, or to piece the universe, to glue the universe together?
That is a huge spectrum of possibilities, because we have the self-proclaimed gurus out there who have supposedly put everything together. But hey, they're still human, because we're all human. We all live in the mud sometimes. And then there are people who are so deep in their own shadows that it is unlikely in this lifetime they will get to a point of viewing anything in this book. We're at a really interesting turning point, that sort of the darker sides of humanity are still really, really dark, but the light is really shining bright. And it's real. I'm really excited to see what comes forward in the future. Some people who have a real mentality of there's always the two sides to the pole, that say that because we are getting so far into some aspects of enlightenment, it's actually making the darker even darker, because that's what balance is. So who knows what's around the corner? I guess I still don't have a crystal ball that I can tell the future, even though I wanted to as a kid. But there is such a huge scope, and you can't change someone else. All we can do is just do our own very best to be the best version of what we can be in our human experience, and hopefully help those around us who want to be helped or want to hear, you know, what chat we want to have on a podcast or a book we want to write. We can't force it down anyone's throat, is what I'm trying to say. I'm certainly not trying to say I'm a guru. I don't know it all. Actually, I was called a know-it-all as a kid. But
yes,
I don't
me
know.
too. Me too.
My goal has always been just to, whatever I learn, to share it to anyone who wants to listen who may not have heard it, and share the work that other people have done as well, because there is so many people out there finding out some amazing stuff. And the more access everyone has to information, the better.
Yeah, it's kind of a free-for-all, open market of ideas, which is a kind of a capitalistic way of thinking of philosophical ideas and idea exchange, or some ideas that kind of prevail over others. But I want to get back to the book, where we have a lot of things to talk about, of course. So what are some of the scientific themes that, or philosophies, or teachings, or scientific methods or experiments that are being covered in the book?
Okay. In the book I speak about so much. Where do I begin? I have to have a look at it. So one of the things I look at is there's a lot of science being done about the heart, and I've had a total mental blank of the right word.
Yeah, you can cheat. You can cheat. You can look at the book.
Neurophysiology of the heart. So basically, in a nutshell, there is a group called the Heart Math Institute who have found that the heart operates like its own tiny brain. We are not just one brain with everything else obeying the boss, the rest of the body, but listening to what the brain says. The heart is a really interactive and quite a unique part of the body. So I talk about the science of that, and how there have been quite a few studies done that look at how something called heart rate variance, sorry. So it's a measure of what is in the heart, and how we can do practices to impact that, and then observe a change in someone else. Because it's a tangible, measurable variable, we can see it in someone else. So it's a way of measuring the beautiful power of the heart. And when we come to the heart, then it underlies with love, There's a lot of layers in that. If you prescribe to the chakra system, the heart is the center of the chakra system, and the center of energy thought to be where energy exits and enters our body, but it's also happens to correlate with the most amazing physiological part of the human body. So I touch on that. I talk about the Hermetic laws. I talk about fundamental chemistry of the structure of an atom and how the energy and the vibration, look at that and how that plays into the spiritual sense of how we impact our vibration and pick up energetic information from others. What else do I talk about?
So let's backtrack to the kind of Hermetic laws, because, you know, my podcast is named Off the Scribe. Yes. And I've had the unfortunate experience of reading the kind of emerald tablets, wow. Which, you know, I knew about the name Thoth, and I knew of the deity, whatever you want to call him. He has a lot of names, but this is the kind of a Greek pronunciation called the Thoth. Or Latinized, I'm not sure anymore. But so let's talk about the Hermetic principles or Hermetic laws. So what are the main creeds of the Hermetic laws? What does it mean actually?
It's a way of looking at life. So if we take it back to the fundamentals, we have the first one. The principle is the principle of mentalism. All is the mind, the universe is mental. So that's really coming back to we are mental, so we are energy before we are physical, which is the whole underpinning of we are spiritual beings. First and foremost, we are these universal mental beings before we are a physical representation of who we are. So that's my first take, and that's really the overarching that really kind of brings it home, I guess. But then when we look at all the others, they kind of support, almost like supporting statements, like the principle of correspondence, of vibration, polarity, rhythm. They all help explain to me what that first principle really is.
Yeah. It seems so weird because when you say the kind of the Hermetic, when you talk about a lot of the different occults and the magic, you know, the kind of the secret mystery cults which practice Hermeticism. A lot of in the Jewish Kabbalah, of course, the kind of sages, the really top tier or the top tier echelons of Kabbalists, sages, they would practice all kinds of weird stuff, shall we say. They would a lot similar actually to Buddhism, starving yourself, depriving yourself of sleep for long days at a time, like trying to keep the fabric of this is strong. Maybe this kind of a cult like mentality that formed. So can you kind of go over some of the misconceptions about the Hermetic principles, or if talk about whatever aspect that you think that is misunderstood or something that is beneficial to humanity and individuals while thinking or trying to practice the Hermetic principles and apply them to their quotidian everyday lives.
The first three Hermetic principles, so the principle of mentalism, the principle of correspondence, and the principle of vibration, they've also sometimes, to some people, are called the immutable laws. So they are That's all there is. They cannot be changed. They cannot be ascended beyond. That's all there is. The rest of the laws are mutable. So the way I've seen it is that no matter what, you can look at the rest of the laws like polarity. We have two ends of the spectrum. I was talking about that earlier. Rhythm, looking at tides, the ebb and flow of tides. I'm a woman, I have rhythm, I have a natural emotional cycle. The seasons, they're all evidence of rhythm in life, but we can move beyond that. And the big one that actually I hadn't looked into it because it was always the last one, but the principle of gender really fascinated me, because if you go back to language, a lot of the Latin languages are based in, they assign feminine and masculine to things. But we're now in an era in society where there's a lot of people who are now moving beyond their gender, either not identifying with the gender in which they're born or having no gender. So that one's a really interesting one, because I'm like, well, if everything is gender, it's not anymore. Where are we? Are we now as society getting to the point that this is the first of the laws that we're kind of beginning to go, we don't need it so much anymore? So that one, I guess I'm still pondering, but it kind of excited me in a way that I went, wow, this doesn't always apply. This is a really good example that this isn't fixed, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. We had the kind of a feminine age in the past, in the ancient past, with all the kind of mystery cults surrounding around the belief that women had those kinds of supernatural insights or premonitions or gypsy.
Divine feminine power.
Sorry?
Divine feminine power.
Yeah, something to that effect. We had the kind of a post Christian church age, beginning in the ancient Roman times to up to this day, I think, in some places. So do you think there will be, there is a Kabbalistic kind of principles that man and women are separated? It's also in Greek kind of mythology and myth creation. Well, Plato and Aristotle talk about this principle that man and woman were born as a one being, and they were separated at one time, at one point in the creation, in the timeline of the creation. So we had the period of a female superiority. We had the period of male superiority. So will there be a kind of a utopian mega eon of prosperity between the sexes and humankind, where man and woman will come together to one super giant enlightened being or something crazy like that?
Oh, wouldn't that be, maybe not one huge super being.
No,
totally
abominations unto God. Yes. No.
To imagine a world in which we actually break down the role gender plays would be pretty amazing. There's political events going on in the world where gender has come back into play hugely, and the suppression of women and their rights. It would be amazing if it no longer becomes a conversation about man or woman and it is just about human being. That would be heaven on earth.
Yeah. Do you have any kind of final words before we go? Because it was a great conversation, really. We have a lot more to talk about, of course, and I would love it if you like it to have another session or another conversation. So what are your closing words? or thoughts.
Ultimately,
Yeah.
oh, I've got a million thoughts, as you probably gathered by the speed at which I talk, and my mind jumps. I mean, if you could see my brainwaves, they're all over the place. Ultimately, we are spiritual beings first and foremost, and the human expression of ourselves it's fleeting, and we don't need to get too caught up in a lot of the little day-to-day things. There is a much bigger picture, and finding peace within ourselves is, I think, is the key. It's peace. It's a beautiful word.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it goes from up down. It's a peace. It starts at the top of the mouth, and then it drops down all the way to the tip of the tongue, which is, I'm an English literature major, so I know a little bit about the subjects, not a lot, because it has to do with kind of linguistics and poetry, which I'm not an expert, but yeah, it's a beautiful world and word, and it was a beautiful conversation, and your final closing words were great, and yeah. I don't know how to end this, but because I don't want to, but I have to. So I'm going to have to tell you thank you so much, Kelly.
Thank you so much for your time. It was a fascinating conversation. You've given me new perspectives even on the way I viewed things, and I really, really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.